He has been quoted to have said, "I didn't know whether to kill myself, burn the house down, or just go away and get lost."
But what do you do with that?
But 8 months later, he married the woman whom he was reportedly having an affair with. So that's what he did with his wife's death.
Whoa.
Welcome to the Chasing Mountains podcast. Today, we're going to talk about Dr. Seuss. He has written all kinds of children's books that I know I grew up on. I have my book that was read to me as a kid and that I read once I learned to read. We had several Dr. Seuss books growing up, but this was one of my favorites.
I only grew up on the Bible and the Lord Jesus Christ stories that have value.
They don't talk about Sneetches in the book of Matthew?
Look, man, I grew up loving these books. It's something, first off, back up just a smidge, because the reason we're talking about Dr. Seuss is we, as Chasing Mountains Media, is not just doing podcasting. The reason we're doing podcasting is so that we can kind of force ourselves to learn kind of throughout the week and be inspired from things. We are wanting to do like children's stories and children's animations and children's books. And the reason is because as parents, we're always looking for the best content. And a lot of the times we don't quite like what's out there or the values that it's teaching along with it. So we're always looking for inspiration. And you had sent me a text this week showing me this book and said, "Have you ever read this book?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And then we just got talking about it and we got looking into Dr. Seuss and I kind of found a lot of inspiration, like do's and don'ts of kind of the industry. And man, it was way more interesting than I thought it was going to be looking into his life.
Dr. Seuss, his full name is Theodore Seuss Geisel. He's an American author, but of German descent. He is one of the best known authors in the world. He's the man behind beloved classics like The Cat in the Hat, Green Eggs and Ham, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. He's now sold over 700 million copies of his books.
Whoa.
Worldwide.
I did not know that.
They've been translated into a total of 20 languages. He died in 1991, died of cancer at the age of 87. So I think still by most measures, a long life.
And he was a heavy smoker. So in 91 and a heavy smoker. Dude, everybody back then was a heavy smoker.
Well, yeah.
The doctors are saying it cures the cold.
Yeah, he was born in 1904. So
yeah,
he saw a lot of that.
Which, by the way, this is March. March 2nd is Dr. Seuss Day, I guess here in the United States. So he was born March 2nd, yeah. So I guess he was born on March 2nd. Okay. So this is kind of like in honor of Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, that was just a couple weeks ago.
There were so many stories, first off, of the 700 million books. That's not just because, he had a good publisher that knew how to market it. These books were wonderful. They transported you to another world where made up words and fictitious characters were 100% believable. You were reading a story for my son upstairs, 100% into it. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to have to go buy 700 million copies for my son.
Yeah. So his net worth at the time of death was estimated to be $75 million. Quite a lot for a children's author.
I would be happy with that. And that was in 91.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of money in 91. Interestingly, we will talk about this today, but Dr. Seuss Enterprises was formed 2 years after his death by his wife to manage the estate and the business, but also to manage the licensing and film deals. Books that are written and then turned into movies and then turned into merchandise and action figures and clothing. The amount of money that's paid for the merchandise piece and for the licensing for movies and stuff, it's quite a bit more to the author, to the creator, versus what they're getting from, Random House or Simon & Schuster or whatever the publisher is. So from my research, that's where you can kind of really go from earning a really good living to like skyrocketing into incredible wealth.
Which I had heard he was kind of opposed to that. Because I know in his early
wealth?
No, not wealth. I think he liked wealth, having movies done and licensing stuff out for merchandising. Because early on, he had some issues with working with the movie industry and he just didn't like the experience. And so it kind of gave him a bad taste in his mouth. And I think he also didn't feel like he had full creative control over things. And, for a guy creating different worlds like that, he wanted to control it. But I remember the first movie that I ever saw that was a Dr. Seuss movie. It was Horton Hears the Who. And I watched that thing till the VHS tape, that dates me, but broke. And I literally had to take it apart, tape it. I told nobody. I taped it with Scotch tape and it worked. But
Really?
it really did, yeah. And I mean, I loved that stuff. And I saw that movie first, and then I really got into the books.
Do you know much about the movies that came from Dr. Seuss? Because I know, the Lorax. I think there was a Cat in the Hat movie.
Right. There was a bunch of like
about...
actual hand-drawn animations years ago.
Yeah, but there's been like recent ones.
But those are like full-blown like actual movies,
right.
Yeah, and full-on like Pixar level of animation.
I mean, wasn't the Grinch Dr. Seuss?
Yeah, the Grinch was. You make fun of me because I say juggernaut a lot, but this man was a freaking juggernaut. Like the hit after hit after hit that he would produce is like an author would love like half of that.
Yeah.
Like, but I got something for you that might just blow your mind. I know it blew my mind, and it makes me realize that my childhood was bullshit.
Oh.
Here's why. It's not pronounced Dr. Seuss.
How's it pronounced?
It's pronounced Seuss.
No.
That rhymes with voice. He said it can also be, this is from him, and some people confirmed it with his roommates. Seuss, because it's German, or Seuss. And it's supposed to rhyme with voice. And in fact, in a few things where he referred to Dr. Seuss, he rhymed it with voice. So all this time, and he said he's okay with people mispronouncing it because that's just what it became. It's not Dr. Seuss. It's Dr. Seuss. Or Seuss.
Yeah, that was probably a good call from him though. So like a lesson in letting the market drive what it needs. Right.
At some point in time when the it's moving so much and it's becoming so successful, how big of a dick do you look? It's Seuss.
Well, especially with like kids' books where kids are actively learning to read in these books, and they're language is used in such an interesting sort of like hooky way with the rhyme structure and everything. And he's like, at some point, you just got to let a kid look at it and say, spell it out. And it looks Seuss.
It says, the majority of people tend to pronounce Dr. Seuss so that it would rhyme with Zeus or moose. However, that's not correct. According to Alexander Lang, a college friend of Dr. Seuss, the correct pronunciation is Seuss, which rhymes with voice, or with a Z, Seuss.
Seuss.
And he's of German descent. So that's been wrong the whole time.
So I wonder if is it like Theodore?
Theodore? Maybe. I also didn't know that was his middle name.
Theodore
that makes sense.
Seuss Geisel.
And a lot of people don't know this, but and I honestly, growing up, didn't know this. And I felt a little betrayed when I found out like certain authors that I liked, like Samuel Clemens versus, what's his name? Mark Twain. Were the same people. I'm like, well, why didn't you just go by your real name? It's like maybe because someone didn't want, someone hunting you down and find out where you lived, but I didn't realize it was a pseudonym until later on in life.
Did you find out where the doctor came from?
No, I did not. Where'd that come from?
So he actually was pursuing, I think I have a note on this. He was pursuing his doctoral degree.
So he's like, I don't want to do the schoolwork. I'm just going to put it on my books.
He adopted the name Dr. Seuss as an undergraduate at Dartmouth College and as a graduate student at Lincoln College, Oxford. So he went to Oxford in Europe. So he was pursuing a doctoral degree, I think, in literature. And his wife, basically, at the time convinced him to ditch it and go into illustrations because he was really good at it, and he had notebooks full of them. Like, these characters. He's got kind of a certain style.
And it's not that he's just a good artist. It's like so unique. It's hard to like, it's remarkable. You can't help but look at it. You may hate it, but you're going to remember it. So with him being as smart as he was, he could have gone on to produce many other books for adults, for teenagers. But it's interesting that he chose books like this for children. And a lot of it was because back in the day, most books were actually produced with like moral guidelines within them, but like so blatantly like obey your parents, follow the law, which is a good thing to know, but they weren't fun. So reading was a chore. And I remember that when I was a kid, sometimes books were just like a chore to read. But with Dr. Seuss, it was so much fun. And I didn't realize until I started doing research for this particular podcast, a lot of times he would start off with a book. He'd have 12, 1,400, 2 to 3, whatever, just like thousands of words. And of writing the book out, the structure, the meaning, the plot, the characters. And then he would start narrowing it down to 50 words within this grade, I can only use these types of words, only this like phonics that fit this way, because I want a child to read this from this age to this age to want to continue to turn the page. And I found that just kind of like, wow. So you have the opportunity to be verbose and like show off your language skills. Like so many people, that do that. And he chose to just bring it way down, not dumb it down, but just bring it down so all can understand. In fact, when you were reading this book to me, I was just like, I like this. This is a lot of fun.
Like when you sat on my lap and I read the book to you before bedtime.
Which I know people want, but there's like a stench in the room right now. And it is this book because it's like 100 years old.
It's actually my brother's book. You talked about making it interesting and his process for sort of narrowing down the words. So that relates to actually the Cat in the Hat. Do you know the story about how Cat in the Hat was written and why? I
do.
You do?
Well, no. So, excuse me. I know the story of Cat in the Hat.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So let me tell you the story behind Cat in the Hat. I thought this was really interesting. In 1954, Life, which was a magazine at the time,
Why did you say that like I'm a dumb who doesn't know what the magazine Life is?
Well, because I don't think Life's been around since like 1970.
Bro, I love Life magazine. He's like, there's this thing, Jacob, you illiterate.
Well, let me be totally honest.
He's not wrong.
So I'm just reading off Wikipedia.
Okay.
I'm just reading off Wikipedia. There's a link for Life, and I had to click it because I wasn't sure what it was.
Oh.
I figured it was a magazine, but I didn't know for sure.
Life magazine's great.
So now that we've got that established, Life is a life. So if you're dumb like me and you don't know what it is,
it's also a cereal that I just freaking love.
I like it too.
Yeah.
Anyway,
sorry, I am a terrible host.
Life published a report on illiteracy among school children, which concluded that children were not learning to read because their books were boring. William Ellsworth Spalding was the director of the education division at Houghton Mifflin, and he compiled a list of 348 words that he felt were important for first graders to recognize. He asked Dr. Seuss, to cut the list to 250 words and to write a book using only those words. Spalding challenged Geisel to bring back a book children can't put down, he said. 9 months later, Geisel completed The Cat in the Hat, using 236 of the words given to him. It retained the drawing style, verse rhythms, and all the imaginative power of Geisel's earlier works, but because of its simplified vocabulary, it could be read by beginning readers.
Wow. So he was actually instructed.
He was tasked with saying these 348 words are important for first graders. And so he was able to use, of those 348, he was able to use 236 of them in The Cat in the Hat.
I feel like there's an important lesson there. He didn't say, you don't tell me how to write a book. I know what I'm talking about. Like I've heard people that all the time, especially with music. Like, hey, what about doing this? Look, don't tell me how to write my music. Instead of listening, absorbing, taking what you like from that information and then representing something. I feel like that's pretty damn cool that he took that opportunity to change it all.
I think it also speaks a little bit to the fact that he valued his target audience. It wasn't just, I'm going to make a whole bunch of money off of kids and parents agreeing that there needs to be value, provided for those kids. So helping them to learn those words is that's cool.
Well, not only about the words, it's something that you brought up to me about this one and why we even did this podcast, the moral behind this story.
Sneetches.
The Sneetches. And the moral of the story is Sneetches get Steeches. I knew my wife would laugh at that one. Thanks, Ellen, for humoring my dumb jokes. But no, there really is a great story behind this. And can you just kind of tell me the premise of some of it?
It says, but because they had stars, all the star-belly Sneetches would brag we're the best kind of Sneetch on the beaches. With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort. We'll have nothing to do with the plain belly sort. And whenever they met some, when they were out walking, they'd hike right on past them without even talking.
What's the premise for the entire book?
Super short summary, and to ruin the ending. It's a story of two divided groups that want to be better than one another. And there's this third party that comes into town, and he makes a bunch of money off of continuing to feed the division.
Well, he sees the division.
Yeah.
He says, they have stars on their bellies. You don't.
Yeah.
I have a solution, but it's going to cost you.
It's Mr. Sylvester McMonkey McBean, this guy, with his sweet ride. So he comes into town, and he tells them he can give them stars. And so they're all about it. He does. And then the group that originally had stars to start with, they're pretty upset about this. And they've decided that they don't want to be the same. They need some way to identify themselves as different now from those that have added stars. So he's going to help him out. He's playing both sides of the fence. But interestingly, I noticed he charges $3 to add a star, but now he's offering for $10. He'll remove the star from the other group. So he's making more on the back end.
It's inflation.
So they just keep going back and forth, and it ends up in this place where both parties just keep paying more money, and they're going in this like infinite loop to get stars removed and then put them back on and then get them removed. It ends basically with him purging the entire town of money, or the entire society, and he has his stacks of cash and he leaves town. And then ultimately, as a happy ending, they learn they're not so different,
right?
And they make up.
But in society, there is always a person who is going to make money on division. We see that all the time with the news stations playing one side against the other, riling things up, over exaggerating like the dangers of something or whatever it is, to create some kind of divide, to create sides that in which you can have echo chambers for each one.
Not even always is it as obvious as creating the divide. It's capitalizing on the divide.
Well, he didn't create the divide. He came in with a solution to help. I mean, like I was saying before, and it's not quite as applicable, but back in the day, there was a certain point in time where royalty in England was easily defined by, we have all this money, we have castles, you're the peasant, you're the poor people. That was simple enough. But then it became a time when in the Industrial Revolution came through where kind of commoners started becoming actually wealthier than some of the royals. So they set decrees to set themselves apart visually, like they couldn't wear certain wigs. The darker colors were for the lower class. The higher class wore the white wigs. They didn't allow the lower class to wear purple. They made it out just to set themselves apart. Yes, there was obviously royalty and then the peasants, but as they saw their divide narrow, they needed a way to set themselves apart. And so we see that throughout society and history all the time. And it's just, he did a good job of putting it out in a children's book. And I think that's something I'd like to do with a lot of the animations and stories going forward, because we're all writers. Our wives, we do music. And I think it's something we can learn a lot from this.
Yeah. Now, ironically, there have been many reports of racism and anti-Semitism in his writing, especially the really early stuff.
I looked some of it up. I didn't know if it was actually that bad.
Yeah, I mean, so I haven't looked it up, but
I had Irene look it up. Irene, can you actually look up the books that were actually canceled real quick? But I want to show you this picture, Dave, of one of the books. It was one of his first books that actually popped off.
Is that what they called it back in the early 1900s?
Off? Oh my goodness.
The publisher's just like, this thing's popping off on socials.
Here, look at this. That picture of the guy right there. And we'll show this for you guys who are listening or for watching.
Wearing the hat?
Yeah. It looks like an Asian man eating food with chopsticks. Just says a Chinese man eating with sticks, right? Like, I don't see how that's offensive. And I know probably the Seuss Foundation is trying to be extra sensitive because we live in a time where everybody's feelings can get really hurt really quick. To my knowledge, I could be wrong if there was anything overtly racist said with any of the books. I mean, mind you, he's born in 1904, so I can't vouch for his character.
Yeah, so like it says a Chinese man who eats with sticks, and there's a visual there of I would say like sort of stereotypical, traditional, historical Chinese with like the conical hat.
I don't feel like it was offensive though. Like
eating
it's not
rice from a bowl with chopsticks. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing said that's about it. There's no additional commentary about this person. There's
also a guy over here with a beard that needs combed.
Right, as he typically does. He's just listing sort of interesting things. But I don't know. Apparently, there's the way that certain characters were depicted and meant to sort of encapsulate certain races. I'm just saying that supposedly the opinion is out there. So, but they did. I'm not sure that they really were canceled so much as they chose as the Seuss.
They chose to not publish them.
Dutch Seuss Enterprises chose, I think it was 6 books that they didn't want to publish anymore, which interesting. So like just to tie it back together, we talk about capitalizing on division. Dr. Seuss Enterprises, again, they chose, this was in-house. They chose to stop producing these books and selling these books. There was a pocket of the conservative right that perceived this at least as like, these books are being canceled. They're being silenced. It's like book burning. But their sales that year were up like 200%.
Wow.
And they sold a ton
they
of
learned
Dr.
about
Seuss
the
books.
sneeches.
And people like, I read something that said like Ted Cruz was selling signed Dr. Seuss books for like 125 grand.
Whoa.
And there was a bunch of other people who just owned those books that again,
yes, they went on eBay.
One of the 6 books that they're selling for like 12 grand.
Yeah.
As we talk about Dr. Seuss's lessons about someone who's going to come along and make money off of, a divide that exists. It's interesting that Dr. Seuss Enterprises made a whole bunch of money off of sort of their own cancellation of themselves. And
That's
it's like
crazy. Well, it's kind of smart.
We need our Business Pro button for that.
Oh man, I think my son stole the Business Pro.
I can't reach it. I see it up there.
When I looked into a little bit of his history, it kind of shocked me a little bit. I just didn't know much about the actual guy. It turns out that he was a bit of an introvert, didn't really like meeting people new, didn't like listening to their boring stories. He kind of he said this about kids too. People say maybe he didn't like kids. He said, well, kids are just like adults. Some of them are great, some of them are awful. And that's kind of true. Because like, trust me, sometimes I have one kid that's great and then another one who scares me and, beats me up when I'm trying to take a nap. But he was saying how, early on, he just didn't enjoy the whole process of, book signings and stuff like that. So a lot of times he ended up playing pranks on people. Like he'd be in a mall and he'd, instead of doing the meet and greets, he'd sneak off and like rearrange like price signs, like making a pair of shoe. Yeah. Instead of it being like, $14, he'd put it for $1.99 just to be. So he was kind of a prankster, a little bit of an introvert, but so he was married for quite a while and his wife got a really rare disease. Can you actually look up what that disease was? But it's very, very rare, which ended up putting his first wife in like the iron lung. Have you ever seen what the iron?
Was it polio?
It wasn't polio, or I could be wrong. Irene will look it up here in a second, but it placed her, I think she became like, not a paraplegic, but like close. And it put her in the iron lung and she couldn't survive without it. So pretty much that kind of separated them. And a lot of the story they don't like to tell was after many, many, many years, they were still friends, but they had different rooms and stuff. He eventually got himself another girlfriend who I believe was also married. She found out about the affair and eventually committed suicide. Kind of was just like, I don't know what to do. And my life is this. And so after many, many years, she committed suicide. Did you find out what she had? It's
a sad story.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. So his mistress, he ended up marrying, and the wife ended up sending the kids off to boarding school because the kids didn't like that she divorced her husband and married Dr. Seuss. And it's kind of a sad story, but the reality is he's just a human. He's a man, just like you and I, and we can make mistakes. But one mistake was his leaving his wife in charge, his second wife, of the Seuss Foundation. When he passed away, he had obviously reservations for licensing things out, having movies made. She's the one who really is the business pro. Even though he passed away worth $70 million, she took it to the next level. So much so that even in 2015, there was a book released because they had found notes and they were able to turn it into a new book. Wow. She's the one who brought it to the movies, the animations, the licensing. It is, did you say Dr. Seuss is one of the wealthiest dead artists? Or how did you reference that?
He's, I think I could look it up, but I believe he's the second highest paid dead author.
Wow.
Or dead anything. I think he's like the second highest deceased earner.
I got that disease.
What is the disease?
She, for more than a decade, had partial paralysis from Guillain-Barré syndrome.
And that's really, really rare.
Yes.
So that's like, I think they call that, I think it's French, they call it Guillain-Barré, because I know I worked with a guy whose wife actually got it as a result of a vaccine. So there are certain...
You shouldn't have said that. Now this podcast is instantly demonetized.
No. I mean, I seriously, I think it's like a... You're right. I should be careful. I'm pretty sure she got a flu vaccine.
Did it also say she got it from a vaccine, I believe?
It's like a risk. Like it's a known, like acknowledged risk with certain vaccinations.
It doesn't say, but Wikipedia, if it's true, does have her suicide letter.
Oh, shoot.
And it's interesting.
Can you read that?
Sure.
Sorry, this is going to go dark real quick, but this.
Dear Ted, what has happened to us? I don't know. I feel myself in a spiral going down, down, down into a black hole from which there is no escape, no brightness. And loud in my ears from every side, I hear failure, failure, failure. I love you so much. I am too old and enmeshed in everything you do and are that I cannot conceive of life without you. My going will leave quite a rumor, but you can say I was overworked and overwrought. Your reputation with your friends and fans will not be harmed. Sometimes think of the fun times we had through the years. And then it doesn't give the rest of that, but it says later on, she said, he has been quoted to have said, I didn't know whether to kill myself, burn the house down, or just go away and get lost.
But what do you do with that?
But well, 8 months later, he married the woman whom he was reportedly having an affair with. So that's what he did with his wife's death.
Whoa. I mean, even though that they were kind of separated, and I think it would have been easier for the letter to be like, I effing hate you. I hope you guys burn in hell. But saying something like, oh man. Ugh.
I mean, that's got to be terrible. So like these two things she's dealing with, infidelity and then also Guillain-Barré, individually, like incredibly difficult to navigate, but like on top of each other, that's tough. Cause like
he sorry to interrupt. He dedicated the Lorax book to his ex-wife or his deceased wife. Anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the condition she had, it's a condition in which the immune system attacks the nerves. It can be triggered by an acute bacterial or viral infection. I think there's supposedly some other things like I mentioned
that sounds so painful.
Could trigger it as well. But
Irene, is that what you have? I'm going to order you an iron lung on Amazon.
It causes like, I think in my buddy's situation, like his wife's like face there was no, it just like drooped, just no.
Like a stroke?
There's no, well, like you lose all like muscle function, I guess, because the nerves are being attacked. So it's a very like scary thing, but I believe you can mostly recover from it. You would never know. Like you would never know with her. I think she still occasionally deals with like some.
I've heard that there's no cure for it to this day.
Yeah, but it can get really bad, and then you can get much better. But like I don't know that you like ever leave it behind. I think kind of like Lyme,
yeah. Do you think that like when they said she had the iron lung, which have you ever seen the iron lung? It looks like a long gray tube that you have to go in and it helps you breathe. Do you think it was a full-time thing like for years, or do you think she had to go in it when she had bad bouts or
I don't know,
fits or whatever they call it? That'd be hard to come back from, because even though like let's just say you fell out of love with somebody, it wouldn't mean that there's not still a part of your heart that still loved them. In a weird way of saying that. I guess on a lighter note, Irene, pull up my computer. Dr. Seuss is such a big part of the culture. And when the Migos came around in that style, someone decided to take a Migos beat and do "Walk It in My Pocket" on a beat like a rap. Have you heard this?
No, I've never read this one.
So,
did you go out and buy this book just for this?
I did. My son's going to love it.
Yeah.
So, the song is called "Walk It in My Pocket." And you know who the Migos are. They have the style, which they, it's
weren't they with 300 Entertainment? Maybe they still are.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Okay.
That's one of our clients. Plug. Anyways, but yeah, "Walk It in My Pocket," it was a few years ago, was done by just some guys in their living room, and they were rapping it, and it went extremely viral on Vine at the time, and then also on YouTube later. So anyways, flip through the page. Irene's going to push play, and it's just goofy. You don't have to push the whole thing because we'll probably get copyright strike.
It's got these fresh new pages. I don't know if I can turn fast enough. Go ahead, Irene. Sorry.
Walk it in my pocket. Okay. Walk it in my pocket. Walk it in my pocket.
Irene's instantly like.
In my pocket. Walk it in my pocket. In my pocket. Walk it in my pocket. Did you ever have a feeling? There's a basket in your basket or a neural in your.
It works.
Was it in your closet? Sometimes I feel quite certain there's a curtain in the curtain. Sometimes I never feel it.
Anyways, you can stop that so we don't get copyright stick. But like, holy heck, it works.
Did I hear them turning the page too?
Oh yeah. Oh dude, they're like sitting in their living room. He's like a full-grown guy, like flipping through the page. Anyways, that was a tangent.
That was a tangent. Anyway, sorry.
My wife's friend Ashley kind of got a random message on Instagram. And so she makes really cool cakes. She designs cakes. She'll If you want like a bust of yourself, she'll make it and it looks great. If you want a house design, you want a soccer ball, she'll make it. And these things look great. Well, one day she decided to make was it a Croc that she did? A big ass Croc shoe. And it went semi-viral on Instagram. And so someone reached out to her and says, hey, we're with the doctor. Do you remember the name of it, Irene? It was like the Dr. Seuss Cake Bake Off or something like that. Anyways, she decided.
Which sounds totally made up.
Yeah, I mean, it was, so Amazon was producing something where they had Tia Tamara, was it? Tia, oh, you know. Tamara from the TV show Tia and Tamara, or Sister. Apparently I know nothing. I should just have you tell the story. All right.
I used to watch that all the time. Sister.
So she was the host of the show, and my wife's friend was one of the cake bakers. So she was the one who did most of the structures and stuff. And anyways, they made it all the way to like the second place, and I was very proud of her. And the thing though that like gave me the cha-ching was that everything in this show, obviously hosted on Prime Video, you could buy then on Amazon just by holding up your phone to the QR codes, and it would take you to everything for sale. All the cooking utensils, the clothing, the baking goods, everything. And I feel like that's going to be the future of things, is like, here's a show or here's a book, here's a cartoon, but you can also buy everything within it.
Irene, did I tell you that? I think I told you that Ashley came up on like a marketing training that I was on. Did you know that?
Really? Oh yeah, you told me. You, for the company you work at, the marketing company.
Yeah.
She was one of the pictures. I think you sent that to me in a text.
Yeah, we were doing
Ashley, you're famous.
I was attending like a virtual marketing conference, and one of the speakers, there was several speakers that were there, and one of them was from Crocs, the company. They were like the I think top marketing director. And the whole talk was on user generated content, UGC. Crocs is really big into that. They're super plugged in with their market.
Can we do next week on Crocs?
Sure.
Because that is an interesting story.
You wear Crocs.
I do.
Frequently.
I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, that I wear Crocs, but I have old people feet and they feel good on them.
Why are you sorry to your mom and dad?
I mean,
do they not want you to
I'm
wear
a
Crocs?
40-year-old guy walking around in Crocs. It isn't.
That sounds perfect to me.
Well, it doesn't look great.
There's nothing wrong with Crocs.
No, there's not.
They're quite comfy. I tried yours on. They're very comfy. But,
but
she had created this cake, was the point. Like this giant like Croc shoe, like this big, that was actually a cake. And they popped that photo up as one of many that they were showing of like how people had tagged Crocs just in their own content. And I was like, that's Ashley.
That's
and then
awesome.
she went on, I think as a result partly of that
one.
Yeah. So anyway.
But it goes to show, I mean, like Ashley didn't go to school to bake like anything.
Shoe cakes?
Shoe cakes. No, she just likes it. She just is like, I think I could do that. Which, by the way, I love that. My wife has that too, where it's like, I don't know.
You have that?
Oh yeah, I have it bad. I mean, mine's to a fault. I don't know how to rebuild an engine. I'm going to start tomorrow. But my wife has the same thing. She's like, I can do that. And I'll do a good job at it. And they put their all into it. Ashley's very similar. And it turned out really good. I wish she would have won, but I think she'll be eventually able to go on to other shows. But they got her on some kind of contract where she can't for a year, but which is BS.
Other shows to go bake?
Yep.
Okay.
So anyways, what's your takeaways from this and how can we apply it to the stuff we're going to do?
So broadly speaking, this is one of many examples that we have and still will talk about, but there's big money to be made in kids content. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, for market share in kids content. We've talked about how, there are many parents, rightfully so, including all of us, that care a lot about what our kids are learning, what they're consuming. And I think that's one of the motivating factors for us as we've looked at a lot of different avenues as like a video and media and content company here at Chasing Mountains. We've looked at a lot of different avenues through which we could create content for kids because we care about it. There's a lot of importance and value as you're like, in the early stages of educating young minds, and kids are so curious, and so it's important. But the other big takeaway is it's very lucrative. There's a lot, if you do it right and you do it well and you're good at it. We've talked about how we should do a similar show on like Cocoa Melon. If you have,
that's a true juggernaut.
your kids are in modern juggernaut too. Like, although they've had a channel, I think, on YouTube for like a decade, but
but like you wouldn't think that would lead to a multi-billion-dollar a year corporation.
Yeah.
But if you can, exactly what you're saying, if you can earn the trust, and I mean by earn, not advertise the trust, but of the parents, and also earn the trust of a child that you're going to actually produce a great story and an adventure. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I mean, because I feel like we're all children at heart. We have, I have a child like mine. So it's like, I think it's going to be fun, man.
Yeah. So we've looked at everything from, a kid's channel where we
Mm-hmm.
create, animated content or, actually film things. But we've also talked about, opportunity, some sort of combination that would include, printed
Mm-hmm.
works. It's actually not that hard these days to get your own book created and published. Kindle has some options. I think it's Kindle Direct Publishing.
Are you concerned at all that we'll face, since it is easier these days to produce stuff, that how do we stand out in the sea of just noise?
Yeah, I think it's quality, in terms of the storytelling. I think that as songwriters, as musicians,
we also have children. And I feel like it's throwing us in reminding us what it was like to be a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've come to realize that you need to be able to walk the line between like provide the content itself that is engaging for kids. But if you can also make it valuable and educational, and then as a third piece, actually somewhat engaging for the parents who need to read it to them. Like I enjoy this a lot. Like I get a lot of enjoyment out of reading these books. How do you think we stand out? Going back to that question that you had for me, because I think that is an important question. I watched several videos the other day of people like using ChatGPT and other AI models to create these books and crank them out in a hurry. What I noticed though, again, is that they seemed a little bit like cranked out AI books. Like they looked great. But I didn't think there was much originality in either the characters or the content. That's me personally. But like, what do you think?
One of the things you had kind of told me when we first started a business, you used the word, what's your unfair advantage? I believe that was you.
I like that. So I'll take it.
Okay.
I'll accept that.
What is your unfair advantage? And a lot of times it makes you think, okay, when you think, what's my unfair advantage of like, you start thinking of your skills that you have over other people. Well, at the same time, you're also thinking of like, what's my weaknesses? And you have another term about that, like weaknesses, strengths, and something else. I forget. There's a term. Anyways.
Oh, maybe like a SWOT analysis?
SWOT, yeah.
Like your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats?
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same process, but our unfair advantage, I feel like, is, yes, we're songwriters. We're pretty good writers in ourselves. We can all draw. We love telling a story, but we also have the capability of filming, animating, and we kind of know the business of branding and the part that
publishing from a music standpoint.
Right.
Like you do you still have your record publishing?
No. I don't have my label.
Publishing
not anymore. No, okay. It just didn't.
You did though for a while. You had your publishing company.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with the music industry. That's a perfect example of there was just so many people dumping kind of crappy music onto tons of platforms where one platform might have 40 million songs on there. How much is actually any good? People do find the good products. They find the songs they love. There may be a diamond in the rough, and then they, all follow this group, and then they move in a different direction. I feel like we can do the same thing. We have children we can test this stuff on, but at the same time, we can earn the trust of parents. I think good quality. I feel like good stories, taking them on journeys that by keeping it in the real world, you're confined to the rules of life. and the rules of our own world. But if you take it to another world, sort of like in a galaxy far, far away, you know,
you can write the rules.
You can write the rules.
Yeah.
You know, like George Lucas said, okay, so there's this thing called the Force. Some people can wield it, some people can't. He made all these rules in which you can create an entire universe. I'm excited about that. Taking them to another place that doesn't exist. And by doing so, you can make up where it's like, walk it in my pocket. And it's believable. And
which is apparently some blonde green thing.
Right.
That's a weird looking creature.
It is. Walk it, get out of his pocket. It's weird.
I think that also, it's easy to get fearful about a barrier to entry that is not so high anymore. Like you talk about with both the music industry, like the music industry has seen this over the last 5 years, especially 10 years too, where that gate has sort of dropped and there's been this like huge flow of sort of self-produced content. And
which is wonderful, but also crappy at the same time.
Yeah. So much of it is so good, honestly. And we've been a part of that, like being able to create music, you know, without the assistance of a major record label. And it sort of throws off the balance of the industry. And we talked about the similarities of a record label and a book publisher as well, you know, how they're representing the artist, the author, and, you know, taking a cut of the earnings and, but also helping to advance the creation of further content. But it's, I think maybe a similar situation with book publishing right now, where there are tools and resources now for people to do it themselves, if they even choose to create a paperback or hardback book. But I think that when those times happen in an industry, I think it allows for people that really should have gotten the attention from a label, people that truly have talent, who have said all along, "Oh, I'm so good. If only the record labels would notice us. If only, you know, we had our shot." Well, there's your shot. Like you no longer have to. There's
no gatekeepers anymore,
right? You don't have to be dependent on being discovered or getting, you know, the approval from someone like the powers that be.
But now it's just you,
right?
There's no one in between,
and everyone else.
Yes, that's the thing. But
right.
like it's you. Yeah. And the world, you have to be good. Joe Rogan said something that inspired me actually, and it kind of made me think about myself. He said, some people, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, some people, they'll whine about, well, I never got my break, or I never had the opportunities you had. I grew up this way. And he was just talking about be undeniable. So even your haters and your fans say your haters may say, I hate this person, but it's undeniable that they're talented and they do great work. Your fans may love you for your work, but just like be undeniable and they cannot deny you. And I feel like a lot of times I've realized, well, I haven't had my chance. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. But it's like, well, maybe I wasn't undeniable. Maybe that product that I thought was the best thing in the world wasn't undeniable. Maybe instead of like looking out, like look in. And so I think one thing too is like, if we can create a product that's undeniable, haters and fans will like it the same. So
yeah, for sure. Whether that's kids' books or anything else. Yeah.
Yes. And kids' books is where we're starting. Kids' books and animations and shows is where we're going to start, but that's going to lead into many other things. And we'll use the products, the licensing for toys and many other things to help fund a lot of other projects we want to do. Yeah. I'm excited, man. Thanks for coming on this journey. And anything else you want to say, Irene?
I'm excited for the journey.
You good? We all good? Let's wrap this up. That was Dr. Seuss, inspired from a text. So yeah, Business Pro. I don't have the button.
I love it.
Okay.
We need the button.
Where is it at?
There it is. You got it. That's the hype button.
Well, close enough.
Business Pro's up there
Where is
too.
It at?
Either way.
Oh,
you got it.
I got it.
There it is.
Look,
That's
Dr. Seuss,
the cha-ching and the hype. Actually, that is the Business Pro. We decided that's
the hype. This is
yeah.
like, that's money when you've
right.
made a lot of cash.
Which there's a fine line. Usually you hit them both.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Dr. Seuss, his second wife. Let's wrap this up. There's a how do you want to end this podcast?
Yeah, just thanks for watching. If you guys have made it this far on the podcast and you haven't subscribed, please do so now. If you've got comments, thoughts, if you also read Dr. Seuss growing up like we did, let us know your favorite book, favorite story. Mine is The Sneetches and Too Many Daves. But let us know in the comments what you like, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, don't be beaches. Read The Sneetches.
And we'll cut that for sure.
The thoughts and opinions on this show do not reflect those of our advertisers, employers, or other affiliates. The content should not be considered legal or financial advice. The Chasing Mountains podcast is a production of Chasing Mountains Media.